Hi, everybody. It's Michelle Rusk, your host with the Holistic Living interview series. And today I have with us Sarica Cernohous. And before we jump in, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you, Sarica, let them know some of the wonderful things that you do. So, Sarica is a whole food, nutrition, and natural lifestyle consultant using metabolic balance of Germany and the Lapis method. She is a pre-digestion specialist, an instructor on traditional food preparation methods via the Funky Kitchen. I love that name. And it's 6-module course, fresh, fun, and flavorful in the Funky Kitchen. Sarica is a practitioner of Japanese-style acupuncture, moxibustion, and LED light therapy, and a practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine theory and herbal medicine. She is also the author of The Funky Kitchen, which talks about the missing link in your nutrition and wellness. So welcome, Sarica.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Michelle. It's wonderful to be with y'all.
Great. So go ahead and jump right in and tell us kind of first what brought you to this journey a few years back.
Oh, it's been more than a few years. I was speaking to someone about like a health issue the other day. It was breast implants and the concerns around breast implants. And as I was typing this message out, I said, I have been concerned about this for decades. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm actually talking in decades at this point. But it has been, I mean, really the health journey about it all really got underway really when I was a teenager, and then picked up steam over the years with kind of building health issues. But it was originally my own digestive issues that became the catalyst for my becoming an acupuncturist and herbalist, because it was the only type of modality that I had used that offered me any relief from the issue I was having. And I had tried a few things, and certainly had worked in the Western medical realm as well, and just was not getting any kind of relief. So that was amazing to me. I was so moved by that experience. And so I went to San Diego and spent 4.5 years getting my master's degree in traditional Chinese medicine. That was a 3,500 hour program, and I'm actually now completing the doctorate in it nearly 2 decades later. Here we are, decades again.
Awesome.
Yeah, so which is wonderful. Yeah. And so, and that was very helpful. It totally opened my eyes to a completely different way of how I see myself, how I see others, how I see the world, the cosmos, my place in it. And so that was profound. And but I still continued to have some issues. And my son, when he was very young, he was having some issues related to digestion. And despite the fact that our family was eating, an organic, grass-fed, gluten-free, I mean, like all the right things kind of diet, we were really still having some issues with him. And it was showing up in all places, in his teeth. And his teeth were full of cavities, so much so that a couple of his primary teeth needed to be extracted. And that really was humbling. Here it is, we're a family that does not eat the standard American diet in any way, shape, or form. We don't use medications. I take care of us with herbal medicine. And yet my son at that age, he was 4, I believe, it was very clear his body, in my opinion, was needing to allocate resources. His body wasn't getting what it needed to make healthy teeth. And so that's when I took an even deeper dive, took a step back and said, what are we doing that's not quite hitting the mark?
Yeah.
And that's when I looked beyond what the foods themselves are, which we were already, doing amazing with that in many respects, but then going deeper and looking at how those foods are prepared, and looking at what has changed in that aspect of what we consume. And that's when I started looking at what our ancestors did, which is how they prepared foods, how they got grains ready to eat. You know, how is it people can go and have sourdough bread in France and feel fine, and they come back to the US, and even if they're eating organic bread, they feel horrible.
I have wondered that.
Yeah, and it's part of that issue is they are working on balance with higher quality ingredients. In America, we've really gone crazy with pesticides and with genetically modified organisms, and those are banned in Europe. And so, you know, we are starting with a different beginning place in many respects, but our family was still using the organic stuff, and we still were struggling. So they also, though, in Europe, they lean a lot on those older preparations like souring the dough before you bake it and consume it. That has a huge impact. And in fact, there's research that has shown that souring a gluten-bearing grain, you know, with sourdough, allows for the breakdown of the gluten just into amino acids and peptides. And so it takes this incredibly disruptive, huge protein structure and breaks it down into simpler bits. And so that's really the foundational composition of my work with the Funky Kitchen. And my work as a pre-digestion specialist, because what we're doing is we're taking macronutrients and through time, soaking, fermenting, very gentle procedures that don't take much of my bandwidth to do, but we lean on these techniques and then we eat the food. Yeah, it's
that's amazing, because I have to be gluten-free and dairy-free myself. And actually, my youngest son, he has also been showing signs of the same thing. So I have removed it from his diet as well. And I also read that nuts, it's easier for our bodies to digest the nuts if we soak them. And so what is that the same? That's kind of all the same.
Yes. So, I mean, if we think of it, you know, the plaguing issue for many people related to cow's milk is, in America, again, what we do is we tend to work with feedlot cows, so it's going to have a different fatty acid profile. It's going to quite possibly have different trace residues of, you know, antibiotics to fatten the animals. There's a whole host of stuff. So let's say we're starting with just even an organic milk. Let's just go to organic. Well, when we're eating an organic milk, it's still, in all great likelihood, is still going to be coming from a feedlot where those animals are consuming grain. Now it's organic grain, which is better, but cows are ruminants. They are not designed to eat grain for every meal of their lives. They're really designed to be on grass and eating their cud. And when we do that, we are feeding that animal something that completely changes the profile of what it becomes, what its tissues are, what its milk is. And so that has a lot of bearing. And so if a person's working with organic milk, I would suggest that they look to find a grass-fed variety. That's going to make a big difference in the fatty acid composition. That's a big deal right there. But then when we take it to the next level, what we have been doing with milk is a lot of people, of course, reach for non-fat and low-fat. Our body needs that fat. Otherwise, what we're left with are the sugars in the milk. And that is, it's like having a milkshake. The fat that's in whole milk actually helps to buffer the body's uptake of the sugar that's in the milk. So working with whole fat's important, grass-fed. But then what we do, and I mean, I can go to any natural food store and it's going to be, if it's grass-fed, oftentimes, of course, it's going to be homogenized. And it's always going to be pasteurized, but it's usually ultra-pasteurized, which is a super high heat. And what these two common, like you have to work hard to not find those two techniques being put on milk. What those two things do is make that milk, which already, we're not baby calves. You know, we are not, I mean, you look at what happens with a little baby calf and how it goes from a small animal to something as huge as a car, a small car. that is a nutrition profile that isn't designed for a human being to be eating regularly. So even under the best of circumstances, but then we homogenize and we pasteurize. And that takes something and makes it just crazy. It is so difficult to digest. And so when we're talking about one of the traditional food preparation methods that can help with this, what we're talking about is culturing. And so that's taking the milk and allowing bacteria and usually some yeast as well to work on that. And so that shows up in our store as like a yogurt or a milk kefir or various cheeses, sour cream, buttermilk. So these are all fermented dairy products. And what happens is in the pre-digestion that occurs with the bacteria and a little bit of yeast if necessary, is that these microbes, they take these bigger macronutrients of fat and protein and carbohydrate, and they cleave them out into smaller components that our body can then more easily put to use. And that is why a lot of people will say, I can't do milk and I can't do ice cream, but I seem to do okay with yogurt and I seem to do okay with cheese. And it's because of this pre-digestion process. So that's just one example of how that can show up as well.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on raw milk?
Well, that's all we use at our house.
Yeah.
And the milk that we get, we're very fortunate. We get it from a farmer who works with a certain breed of cattle, that the protein that's within that, and folks may see this now when they go into some of the natural food stores, it'll say A2 milk.
I have seen that.
Yeah, and that's one of the protein structures. The A1 is what most people consume in America, because we run Holsteins in this country,
Right.
those white cows, and they have a huge milk production, very low butter fat, and it's higher in A1. That's its main kind of protein composition, and that A1 is very allergenic to people. And so A2, that comes from different breeds like Jerseys and Guernseys. They produce a milk that has a much higher butter fat and has a different protein structure. And so the milk our family gets, we get it in glass half-gallon jars, and I pick it up once a week. It's got about that much butter fat at the top of it. You know, we just shake it up. And then that's what I make our yogurt from as well.
Yum.
So now, I understand why milk was pasteurized in the first place. And I understand people saying, well, but what about microbes and all of this? That's a personal decision. You have to get to know the farmer that you're working with. You have to look at the methods that are being used to make that milk safe for you. This is the thing that folks need to understand, is that in even an organic feedlot standard milk production facility, those animals can have varying degrees of something going on that's not so awesome. And the milk will still go into the bucket, because they're then going to pasteurize it. So there can be blood, there can be pus. I mean, it can be nasty. There can be a little bit of fecal matter on the teat. And that can go into the bucket because it's going to be pasteurized.
Yeah.
Whereas
that doesn't make it safe still. I mean, that still doesn't make it safe.
I don't want to eat that. I mean, that's gross. And so when you're working with a healthy raw milk dairy,
right,
the amount of care that needs to go into making sure everything is clean and right, the animal is healthy, is so important. And so I live in Arizona.
Yeah.
And so in Arizona, we can allow for raw milk sale at the grocery. And so one of the producers here in the state, you know, he contacted me and said, Sarica, if you could help me get the word out about this. And I'm like, oh, sure, absolutely. To be able to work with an A2 cow, and create enough milk that it can go statewide to these different natural food stores, and, you know, keep it on the shelves for people. The amount of cleanliness that needs to go into that operation is it can be night and day to what can be happening at a standard feedlot operation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Now for someone that can't tolerate the raw milk, is it more of a casein issue? Like they just,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so that's the other, my gosh, we could spend an hour talking about milk. It's exactly that. So for some people, it's the lactose, and that's why they seem to do okay on a lactate type milk. And that's the sugar component. For other people, it's the casein, which is the protein component. The thing that's cool about fermenting things is that the bacteria are going to break down both of those, convert them into simple. That's why I don't know if you make yogurt, but you take your milk and you put the culture starter into it and you put it in the incubating chamber, which is a yogurt maker. And, what goes in there tastes sweet. And what comes out of there 8 hours later is tart. And it's because the sugar has been a fuel source for the bacteria. And what they've done is they've transformed it from, this sugar into acids, carbon dioxide. So it's converted. And so if you were to actually, test that milk after the 8-hour period, it would be very low sugar content compared to what it had been 8 hours prior.
Wow. That's awesome. That's super interesting. And it's definitely something to consider because I know I'm in Virginia and we have farms around here as well that offer the raw milk. Now for us, we have to do cow shares.
Sure.
So
there's usually some kind of workaround. It's like an underground railroad,
But I think it's silly.
It is, but you're in a great area because it's that's such a rich, verdant area. Where we live, it's not. And so, and so your raw milk, even if it came from the same cow as my raw milk, is going to have in some differences in its nutrient profile because your animals are going to maybe be eating bluegrass or whatever, and ours will be some kind of wild grass here to the west.
Interesting. Awesome. Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the next topic now.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about moxibustion and LED light therapy. So how do you use those?
Yeah. So moxibustion is an interesting substance. I fell in love with that stuff when I was receiving my degree. The thing that's lovely about acupuncture is it is such a different way of communicating with the body than really anything else a person can do. And you're creating these little micro injuries all over the body. If you needle someone well as an acupuncturist, then it should be, in my opinion, totally comfortable for that person. They should be falling asleep as you're doing it. And I tend to do a Japanese style, which is shallow, fewer needles, a very sharp and very thin needle, and only going in maybe 1 millimeter or so. So my treatments are very superficial, and yet, even with that, it can be too much for some people. It can be too draining on their constitution. And so the moxibustion is unique in that it's a therapy that has been used for thousands of years. And in fact, the earliest characters for the acupuncture also included moxibustion. And so it's been part of the technique of body care in the East for as long as the needles have been. And so the way I like to think of what happens with moxibustion is that where needles help to manipulate and direct energy and direct the body's attention to areas, what happens with the moxa, and that's short for moxibustion, is that it actually gives some energy back to the system. And so and I like to do it directly on the skin. There are other methods where one can use a little box that's sitting above the skin that you kind of, smolder into. And then there are other techniques using a lesser grade moxibustion that are like cigars almost, that smolder and you just kind of go over the acupuncture point, but not touching the skin, and very hot. Wow. And so I'm going to just bring this here. So this is moxibustion. This is a very fine quality Japanese style of moxibustion. And what that is, you know, with some leaves, you can see kind of a fluffy undergrowth on them, you know, with different plants. And like out here in the West, we have some plants that grow wild that way that are kind of fluffy. And so this is a bit like that. This comes from a plant that is commonly known as mugwort.
Okay.
Yep, Artemisia vulgaris is the Latin on it. And that's harvested. And so what I just showed you, that little box of moxa, before they even sell it, they let it age for 14 years to allow the essential oils that are in there to really settle out, to even out. So when I go to make a small rice grain size amount of this, and I put it on the skin, it attaches to the skin with just a little bit of ointment on the skin, and then I light it with a moxa stick, an incense stick. And so it burns down that little cone. As it gets right to the skin, then I snuff it out. And then I'll do another one on top of it and another one on top of it. And what that does is, not surprisingly, that drives some nice infrared heat into the system and actually allows me to work directly on an area, putting some energy back in there. And obviously that's going to help with circulation and getting the tissue in that area to relax as well. And there are other methods, but that's mostly the way that I use it for patients.
Wow. So
I know it's different.
It's different, but it's really neat. Like I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, it's very neat. And then a couple years ago, I was looking in one of my acupuncture journals. I was reading an article, and I was being vain. I was really into this article because it was talking about I've been trained in doing cosmetic acupuncture, you know, where you're working on the skin and everything. Yeah. And this was an adjunctive therapy to that. And that's what really caught my eye on it. And it's LED light therapy with near infrared in the pads as well. And so with this unit that I have, let me see if I can turn it on. They're neoprene pads that are embedded with either red or blue LED lights, and then also with near infrared light. And is it on? Yep, there we go. So here's a red pad.
Oh, wow.
Blowing up around me. And here's a red and blue pad. Oh. And these LEDs, they penetrate to different levels of the tissue. And so of these, the near infrared is the one that penetrates deepest. It goes deep into the dermis, actually goes in a few inches into the, into the tissue. Mm. And in fact, one of the things that has made me continue to really love working with these is when a person is dealing with traumatic brain injury, if they're dealing with, and that can even be emotional, without a physical issue, but some type of emotional trauma that has affected the brain and literally has caused places of the brain to shut down in a coping mechanism. These lights help. They penetrate the skull. The near infrared penetrates the skull, and they increase the circulation through the skull to the brain. And so I continue to use them, for the skin. But to me, in many respects, it's like being able to do a lot of moxa over the area where I have the lights, because they also, with that near infrared, they warm the tissue very beautifully, and they cause the release of a signaling molecule within our body. It's called nitric oxide. And where nitric oxide shows up, that is where healing starts to happen. So it's a signaling to healing. Wow. And so for every one of my acupuncture patients, they also have the lights. I'll put the needles on and then we'll do the lights over the needles, because I'm needling so shallowly, my needles fall over. And so it activates, and then I'll put the lights over it.
Oh, wow.
It's awesome. It's pretty yummy.
So Backing up just a little bit with acupuncture. So I know that there's a lot of different diseases and everything that you can use to help treat. What are some that you have used acupuncture to treat?
Oh my gosh. You know, it's interesting. We were just talking about this in one of my doctoral classes last night. I was explaining to our group, I said, you know, seriously, we are so well-rounded in
Yeah.
what we're trained in and what we offer to patients. And then, you know, you go out and practice and decide if you want to have a focus on things. So a lot of people do focus, you know, they'll do sports medicine with acupuncture, or they'll do, you know, to enhance and recover, deal with long-standing injuries. But then there are a lot of practitioners who really focus on maternal health and fertility. To be honest, I'm kind of a general practitioner. I actually do see a lot of kids in my practice, and as they get to trusting me and working with the lights and the cold laser and a little bit of moxa and some gentle acupressure, they let me start doing needles on them, and they love them. And a lot of kids come because, you know, there's, you know, some anxiety in the classroom, or they're not sleeping well, or there's digestive upset. And children, because, you know, in Chinese medicine, we would say, you know, their qi is so fresh. They don't have layers of issue that they've dealt with and band-aided. And, you know, by the time you get to my age, it's like, oh my gosh, you're like an onion. You have to just peel back all the layers, you know?
Yes.
Whereas kids, they respond very quickly. And so, so it's really cool. And I personally work with a lot of women, you know, middle-aged women who are struggling with, you know, their cycles and what happens when we hit about 40, and just like how it can seem like everything has gone a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
And just helping them to navigate those waters. And to me, the acupuncture and the lights are such an awesome reset for their body. And then for us to have that time, you know, like in our first session, where I really help them with lifestyle guidance, so they don't.
I was just going to ask that.
Yeah,
that's the first step. But I think a lot of people just need to recognize that it's a lifestyle. You know, it's something it's not just part of you that has to change. It's all of you.
It is. You said it so well. And that's really what it comes down to. And my first session with everybody, I tell them, I don't want you coming to see me very often. I want us to take a good look at what you're doing. And then, you know, we'll probably need a few treatments kind of in a row. But then after that, I want it to be about you keeping your own momentum going.
Right.
And that's where the answer is always within us. I feel like as practitioners, one of our most basic duties is to help people see themselves maybe in a different light, and teach them to fish rather than fish for them. And it's an interesting thing because, again, you know, it's been almost 20 years since I was last in school with other people, my peers. And being with folks again that way, and all these years of developing my practice, I realize not all holistic practitioners really take that time to work with the discussion of what people can do on their own.
Yes.
They just come in and put in the needles. And that wouldn't work. Couldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is a really important discussion, because they definitely have to recognize that it's accountability for yourself. You know, you have to nourish your mind, body, and your soul. And if there's a block, I really feel like if there's a block in one of those areas, you're not going to reach that, you know, that maximum wellness.
No, you're not going to. And I've learned over the years that you know, I've had people say to me, Sarica, when I come see you, I feel like I'm just like getting the whole enchilada. You know, I'm getting, you know, we're talking and I'm getting my, you know, my head game on and, you know, all of this, which is awesome. I love that. And I'm so glad that folks trust me that way. It means so much to me. And yet there are still definitely situations where I just know this is out of my league. And so you also, I think as a practitioner over the years, you just recognize the places where you can help and then where you need to ask for additional support, and hopefully engender in the patient a sense of, yes, this is the next level that I should explore.
Right. Yeah. So quick question. I have never had acupuncture done before. I know people that have, and they swear by it. They love it. But when you're doing acupuncture, like let's say it's a digestive issue.
Yeah.
So is it specific where you put I would assume so, where you're placing the needles in regard to what it is that you're trying to treat?
Yes, you're spot on there. Exactly. And I'll tell you, people are going to have different ways. You know, when you're talking about a medicine that's like, I mean, it's estimated it's maybe 5,000 years old.
Right.
I mean, what the heck? I mean, we can't even fathom that. You know, I mean, in America, we get so caught up in, you know, our AMA, that's like 100 years old.
Yeah.
Seriously. And so there are going to be many ways to approach this medicine. I mean, there are people, I remember I had surgery once. I had an acupuncturist come to the hospital. He didn't go anywhere near where my surgical site was, but he did what's called, it's like a microcosm type of acupuncture where the body is mapped out in different parts of smaller parts of our body. So
Yes.
the face has that, the ear and the hand, the scalp, the feet.
Yeah.
And he came in and just did some points on my hand, and the nurses said they had never seen somebody get up and go to the bathroom as quickly after surgery as I did. And it was totally because I had him come and help my brain to reset on what it was capable of doing and to dial back the inflammation, help with the healing process. And so, but I don't know his method. Like, I don't know how to do that. Right. And so, you know, my technique is going to be totally different than another acupuncturist, because there are so many things that we can pull on that we gravitate to as practitioners, you know, that work for us. I mean, there are practitioners who do very deep needling, and they go for a deep muscle twitch, and in that, and I had a brush of that kind of training, and I know it didn't work for me, and they're just not who I am. And so, but people need to know that. I mean, here it is. The type of acupuncture I do in some circles would be considered placebo acupuncture because it is so superficial. However, it is a very widely and successfully practiced method of acupuncture in Japan. And so, you know, there's just a lot of different ways to approach it. So for me, yes, if someone came in and I'm working on their belly, you know, it's the digestive stuff, I'm going to feel the abdomen, see if there are places where it feels like things aren't moving quite right, or they're a little too loose, that sort of thing. Then I'll probably put in a few needles on the abdomen, maybe a few on the arm, maybe a few down on the feet or the legs, and then I'll have you turn over and we'll continue working on the entire back side of the body. But that's how I do it.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That's just really interesting. So really quick, I know you also dabble a lot in essential oils.
Yeah, that's one of the other modalities back there.
Yeah. Well, and I know, you know, I like to use essential oils as well. I have found that they really help with a lot of different ailments. If my kids come to me and they're like, oh, mama, this hurts or this hurts, like one of my favorite, I love arnica gel, which is, you know, the herb, and you can add an essential oil to it or whatever. Like if my boys particularly, I think they suffer from growing pains in their legs, and I love to use that. But just tell us a little bit about how you use that in your practice as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, you and I were talking about this when, you know, before we started recording, and I'm seriously, a lot of money is sitting on that shelf behind me. I mean, I have so many different types of oils, and they all, just like with herbal medicine, Chinese herbal medicine is what they call pharmacopoeia. And it's something where you are, you're taking a lot into consideration, and you're creating formulas that are unique to that person. I think of essential oils that way too. I treat them in my brain the same way. So if someone comes in and they're chilly and their digestion is, like they're not doing well, they're having loose stool, I'll want to work with different oils, just a small amount, in probably a CBD carrier oil, but they'll be warming. So I'll be working with things like clove and cinnamon and ginger, and maybe black pepper, things that help to warm. Whereas if someone's got, a headache, a migraine, and it's just cranking and it feels like heck, that's where maybe working with the more cooling oils like wintergreen and peppermint can be so opening and cooling to that area. So, it's having that catalog of options really is helpful.
Wonderful. Wow. Yeah. Wow. I'm in awe. I think I've really learned, I've really learned so much just from talking with you. I'm sure our viewers are thinking the same exact thing. And I think too, just as a mom, just as a mom, I'm really hungry and just thirsty for as much information as I can get, particularly for myself, for my family, for my own clients, because I think one of the things also that has happened, and you can vouch for me on this, is I think we've forgotten to listen to our own body's instincts. Yes. Which is one of the reasons why I decided to really do this, because for a long time, I fought the instinct that I wasn't feeling well all the time. Mm-hmm. And I was going to doctors, I think like most of us had, and they kind of just tell us, we don't know what's the matter. So just, be quiet.
And it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
So frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And I so hear you. I don't know what it is about our society where I remember growing up in the 70s, and Calgon, take me away. And then there's I don't even know what the med was, but it was, I haven't got time for the pain. And I'm like, God, that was the soundtrack to growing up.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And so, we just, what you go to any regular grocery, they sell ibuprofen in quart-sized containers.
Right.
Pop that crap like it is, like it's M&Ms. I used to. And so, it's like run. And all those just symptoms, they're just signs of our body saying you're not doing something quite right. So please stop trying to tamp it down. Mm-hmm. Can we please just slow down and get quiet and really listen to what is being asked of us?
Yeah.
And sometimes, even with the best of training and, the best information coming at you, you still sometimes do need someone to look at it with you.
Yeah.
Because, there's this adage, you can't see yourself swing. And so that's why you need a coach. And, I'm pretty well versed on many aspects of health and medicine. And, I still need someone to look at me because I see myself through the prism of my experience.
Right.
It's just too close to it. And so, but it starts with knowing that the answer really is deep within us. Mm-hmm. And we have to create the safe space for that to begin to come forth and be honest with what we need in relation to it.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I think we covered a lot of ground today.
We went everywhere.
We did, but I think it all has to do with total wellness, and I think that's a great way to say it, because I think you do have to go everywhere. You have to go everywhere inside of you to really get there. So I can't thank you enough for coming on and for sharing all of your knowledge with us. I'm just so grateful.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. This has just been so much fun. Thank you for just keeping it open so we could talk about so much.
Yeah. No problem. And so any last words, anything you want to share with the viewers, with the audience?
Okay. I would say make sure you're getting good sleep. I know we didn't talk about that today, but really making sure you get good sleep, because that ends up having such an impact on your food choices the next day, how you relate to other people, everything. And so whatever you need to do to make a good sleep hygiene pattern for yourself so you can get that good rest. It's when our body detoxifies. It's when we reset for the next day. Of all of it, that's kind of at the top of the heap.
Yeah. I'm not doing so well, Sarica.
Girl, you got yourself a puppy and a baby.
Yeah.
It will, but you go take those little disco naps when you need them, you just look after yourself. And we all have those different seasons in our lives, I mean, yesterday I was in class for 10 hours. Good times.
Oh.
And that's how my Mondays are right now, but it won't always be this way. And we just have to know that when we're in seasons like that, that we have to just be extra good to ourselves.
Yeah. I try to practice meditation.
Good girl.
In the middle of the night. In the middle of the night when I can't sleep, I just kind of, if I'm just laying there, if I'm nursing, my 9-month-old or whatever, and I'm just laying there and I'm just like, well, I kind of coach myself in my head and just get to a place of relaxation.
When I was about 30, I plugged into the importance of that, because up until that point, if I found myself awake for whatever reason in the middle, it's like I'd take it personally. I was not happy about it. And then I'd stress about how the next day was going to be so messed up and blah, blah, blah. And somehow, some way, I just got this wisdom insight of like, no, you're going to keep a calm head and you're going to do exactly as you're doing, Michelle. You're just going to relax and just be very gently positive with yourself. Makes all the difference. Oh, my dear.
Yes.
It does. So I'm so stoked you're doing that, because I know you're awake a lot during the night.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. You all take good care.
Yes, you too. And thanks for everybody for joining us today. And we will see you guys later. Hope you enjoyed it.